What I'm going to talk about is the impact of substance abuse upon the family. And the areas I'm going to cover are going to be uh, learning about the drugs of abuse, defining use, abuse, and dependence, because a lot of times that's a confusing area, identifying factors of addiction. I'm going to talk about how families react and respond when there's addiction in the picture. What are the implications for people who are working with these families? And what are some treatment options available? And also what treatment outcomes are like. I may forget outcomes. Someone remind me. In general, I'm fine going along. If someone has a burning question, feel free to ask it at any time. I generally revert back fairly easily. Otherwise, I will keep time at the end for questions. First of all, drugs of abuse. Anything that, the way they define drugs of abuse depends on who you ask. We start with the formal one, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency. They enacted the Controlled Substances Act in 1970, and they arranged the drugs in schedules 1 to 5. The first one, Schedule 1, was drugs which had no approved medical use. These were available only for research. These had a high potential for abuse. There is a lack of safety in using them, and some of the drugs that you have for that are things like heroin, LSD, marijuana. We got medical marijuana now, but that's a whole different ballgame. It's still a Schedule 1 drug, and I think the federal government and the state governments are still working on that one. Schedule 2 are drugs which have a very high potential for abuse. These are drugs that are only available by prescription. They're highly monitored. You do not get refills. You have to keep getting a new prescription every time from the doctor. One of the drugs of that kind is one that's quite often abused, OxyContin. Other drugs in that category are drugs like PCP, cocaine, morphine, methadone. Not because they prescribe cocaine, but it comes in that category. They have their own system of how they will put drugs where they'll put it, and they keep moving the drugs around. Then you got Schedule 3. These are drugs which are available by prescription. They can be refilled. They have a slightly less potential for abuse. If you were to get dependent on them, it would be a moderate dependence, and we'll talk about different kinds of dependence also. These would be things like anabolic steroids, the ones that people use to kind of muscle build, and codeine. Okay? With young people, a lot of times they talk about Vicodin. That would be right here. Schedule 4 is pretty much, again, low dependence, a low potential for abuse. And these are generally benzodiazepines, Valium, Xanax, the anti-anxiety kind of medications, all the benzos, sedative hypnotics. And then you have Schedule 5. These will be over the counter. These are going to be cough syrups with the codeine in them, cough medicine basically, very low potential. You've got to have a lot of it, and it tastes quite yucky. So it's one of those things that you go with. So this is how the government defines it. And for those of you who were around in the 70s, you may have heard of the uppers, the downers, the all-arounders. Okay, that's the other way you go with it. Some people will define it with the uppers, downers, all-arounders. It's stimulants, which is your uppers. Your downers are your depressants, and then you have your hallucinogens, which are your all-arounders. Okay, that's the other way people will define their drugs. And basically, it sounds kind of cool to people who are over 50, but what they were basically looking at is the effect it has on the body. Okay, most of the drugs that are downers, the depressants, will slow down your body functioning. And most of the drugs that are stimulants will speed up your body functioning. And the hallucinogens, the all-arounders, they basically just mess with you. Okay? And they will work either way, up or down. There's really not very much that you know about what they're going to do. A classic example of that is marijuana. Okay, it is a hallucinogen. People don't really know what it is, don't know how to classify it, but it does get classified as a hallucinogen. And the reason for that being a hallucinogen, what it does is, and I know about this with children, if a young person is using it and they have ADHD, they tend to get a little paranoid using it. And this is anecdotal experience that I've heard during the time I was working with kids. Those who are not ADHD, it kind of chills them out, it cools them out a little. So these drugs kind of, you don't quite know what effect you're going to get with them. LSD, you don't quite know whether it's going to be a good trip or a bad trip. Okay? It can work different ways. Your stimulants, some of you are sitting with stimulants right now. The caffeine, right? That's a nice legal one, which is another way to go with it. You've got your legal and your illegal, okay? You've got nicotine. Again, it's legal for some, illegal for those under 18. You've got cocaine, illegal for everyone. And what happens, amphetamines, a methamphetamines, a crystal meth, which is also coming into areas. You've got that thing working over there where drugs will come into fashion. Recently, there was this big thing about crystal meth. And some drugs just don't ever go away. Alcohol, marijuana, heroin, cocaine. Okay, your standard drugs of choice. It'll form kind of like the basis on which people may add other stuff. And then sometimes when you have people who have co-occurring disorders, they will use just about anything and everything that comes their way, a lot of times. More often with younger people than with older people, but the young people grow up and become older people. And the habits don't change very much because it's confounded with something else. Your depressants are alcohol, benzodiazepines, the narcotics, the pain medications all come under the depressants category. Okay? Inhalants, very common among young people. It's freely available and it's cheap, you know. You can sniff anywhere you like. And then everyone knows about hashish and about marijuana and acid and peyote and all those kinds of stuff. You also have drugs which are like designer drugs, where they take things and mix them up and make those drugs. Okay, so you also have a whole bunch of designer drugs that keep coming out. Ecstasy was legal in the district till maybe about 5 years ago. It was one of those things that kind of no one really looked at, and that happens a lot of times. There's a whole history behind why some drugs are legal and other drugs are illegal. And the reason I raise that is because that's something we have to look at in ourselves a lot of times, you know. How do we really look at substance use? It's something you've got to think about, and I'll come back to that again later, but I like to throw it out early enough so that people kind of start thinking about it. Okay? So we're talking about drugs that can get abused. So what exactly are we talking when we say abuse? What do we mean? And this is where I'm going to draw a little to show you one way of looking at substances, and this is a way that I've found which I basically think works pretty well. I look at substance use as a continuum. So I look at it like this. I see over here a point which is no use, okay? And then I see a line come this way where you start to work along the line. And then you have a little area over here which we call use, okay? And use would be typically something like this. I go home in the evenings. Sometimes in the evenings, not every day, maybe once a week or twice a week, I go home, I'm making a nice dinner, pasta with meatballs, spaghetti and meatballs. It's a nice dinner, a little glass of red wine with it. I pour myself my red wine. I sip it as I'm letting the pasta boil al dente or whatever, and then making my sauce, putting it together. I continue to sip my glass of wine. I take it with me to the table. I drink the glass of wine. I say, tastes very nice. And I have it, and I drink the one glass, and I put it away, and I'm done. Okay? That's use. I haven't drunk it fast enough for it to give me a high. Basically, what I've done with that is I've not really put myself at risk. I haven't put anyone else at risk. I've sat over there and had my one glass of wine. I haven't become obnoxious. I don't drink it very often. I'm very moderate in how much wine I had. And there aren't any negative consequences to any of it because it really didn't do anything particularly, other than me sipping it and enjoying it and saying, tastes good. Okay? That's use. If I were to think about it, I'm having a bad day at work and I say, I'm going to go home and I'm going to have a glass of wine because I like wine. I'll have it with dinner. I'll just have the one glass of wine, but I'm thinking about it and thinking about how it'll relax me. What I'm adding is another element other than just my physical state. I am starting to now add a little psychological thinking. Okay? There's a little psychological pull to it. I'm looking upon it as a resource to help calm me, or to chill me out, or to relax me, or whatever. Okay? This is use, and the first scenario where I just had it and I wasn't thinking of having it at work or whatever, this one is what is quite okay if you're over 21. Okay? If you're over 21 and an adult, that's good use. And when you're having something like that, the government has turned around and told us that men can drink 2 drinks a day to a maximum of 14 drinks a week. Women, 1 drink a day. Life has never been fair. 1 drink for a woman, up to a maximum of 7. And you may not hold them all together and have them on a Saturday night. You've got to have, if you're having a drink only on a Saturday night, 1 for a woman, 2 for a man. Okay? The reason for that is because of the way your body fat works, and you know, men supposedly have less fat in the body and more muscles and things of that kind. There are a lot of factors that affect how you process alcohol, and we won't get into that, but there are different things. It's part of a much larger topic. Then you move along this continuum and you go to something that is called abuse. Okay? Over here, when you go to abuse, what you're doing is you're drinking more often. If I'm going home, I'm thinking about the alcohol, I'm going home, I'm having 2 drinks. Some days I'm having 3 drinks because I don't like that boss of mine. I wish I didn't have to work for them, but I need the paycheck. I don't like it. I'm going to go home. I'm going to have my 2 drinks a day, and I'm going to keep having my drinks. And I'm abusing the alcohol. I'm using it. It's becoming a crutch for me. Some days I may have 4 drinks. So what I've really got over here is I'm making a poor decision around my drinking. I'm making poor choices over here. I'm drinking more than I should be drinking. My frequency is higher. The amount I'm drinking is more than I should be drinking. And what I am doing is I am not really dealing with the emotional problem, because you know what? The next morning when I wake up, my problem is still there. I'm unhappy at work. Nothing that I did has changed it. Okay? That's abuse. Sometimes people get fancy and add a category called misuse. For me, misuse is just abuse. But you know, these are the ones, we are patriotic Americans, we are going out and it's 4th of July and we are going to drink. So whoever it is, husband or wife, they're going to a 4th of July party in the back. You know, why 4th of July? You know, Memorial Day is coming, Labor Day is coming. I mean, there's all kinds of holidays coming. And you decide you're going to have a party, so one person says, you be the designated driver and I'll drink. And they drink more than they should drink because they're celebrating. Okay? They don't do this often. They do this maybe 2 times a year or 3 times a year. Some people would call it abuse, and it is what you call considered, you know, they'll call it misuse. But it really is abuse, occasional abuse. But that's the category it goes in. Some people get really, really upset with this. And that misuse is abuse. They think misuse should be its own category. When I have worked with clients, they have gotten very upset when I say that misuse comes here in this section and not in that section. We've had many conversations and differing points of view on that. Now, what happens about this is very interesting. As long as I'm in use and in abuse, I can kind of cycle back and forth along this path, okay? But then at some point, way down the line, your body is very forgiving, okay? It can take a lot of abuse. You cross a certain point over here, and there's no going back. It's like a switch has been flipped. And at this point, you come to dependence, okay? And when you come to dependence at that point, once you've crossed this particular area, okay? You no longer can go back here. And what dependence gives you is basically what you have over here is you have lost your ability to choose. You no longer can choose whether you will drink 1 drink or 5 drinks. Once you start to drink, you will drink till you're drunk. Once you start to smoke your first joint over here, you will smoke till your stash is gone. Once you take your first snort of whatever it is, you know, your cocaine, your first line of cocaine, if you will, you are going to be doing it till it is all gone and you have no more left, okay? And that is what dependence is. It is, sometimes they call it, there is a loss of control. There is definitely an absence of choice, a loss of control. There is a compulsion. There is a need to use. And there is a continued use despite negative consequences. So people could get a DWI and they may stop for a day or two, but then they'll go back to using again. Okay, people may get a possession charge and they will stop for a little while, but they'll go back and use again. People who are here, I've had clients who had dogs. Guess which urine they took in to get tested? Now, can you imagine anything worse than someone running after the dog to catch the dog's pee? Okay? That is dependence. Because they are sometimes afraid to give it up. The way we define it also, there's textbook ways to define it. And when they talk about it over here, they talk about it as the presence of tolerance and withdrawal. So what it means is, and tolerance is something, when we come again to the family part, I'll come back to talk about this when we talk about the factors. But one of the things that you have with tolerance is that it can be either innate or it can be acquired, okay? And what that means is, if I were to start drinking today and you were to start drinking today, I could have a drink and I'd be standing fine, and you would have a drink and you'd throw up. And you'd say, that's terrible. And I would say, that tasted good. Nothing happened, it feels good. And then I could have 3 drinks and I'd still be standing and you'd be puking your guts out. Now, you drink often enough and throw up often enough, over time your body will get used to it and you'll be able to have 2 drinks before you throw up and 3 drinks before you throw up. What you're doing is you're acquiring tolerance. I already have been given the gift of tolerance. I have it innately, which is not really a gift, okay? But I have an innate tolerance. And tolerance is one of those things that tells you when people have a higher chance of getting here. If I have a tolerance and I can drink a lot, or I can use a lot, okay, more chances of me being here. If I get withdrawal symptoms, more chances of me being here. Over here, you'll get hangovers, which is also withdrawal. But this withdrawal is different, okay? For alcohol, this withdrawal is going to be withdrawal of the kind that's going to really give you, it's going to give you the shakes. You're not going to be able to stop shaking. You're going to have your face getting all flushed. If someone comes in with a heroin kind of withdrawal, they are going to be sitting over there shaking, shivering, goosebumps, really very unhappy, diarrhea, very unhappy, in tears, they cannot sleep. All kinds of stuff happens to them, okay? And of course, if you're doing some of the prescription drugs and you're doing things like OxyContin or something, which is same narcotic family, pain medication family, very, very difficult. Very quickly addictive, very quickly, you can build up a tolerance. What you look at when you look and talk about factors in addiction, the first one is genetics, okay? That is the first one that we're talking about. That is, in your family history, is there someone who had some form of addiction? And if there is someone who has some form of addiction, then it is highly likely that you have a higher propensity. I keep going back to alcohol because the most research has been done with alcohol withdrawal and alcohol studies kind of stuff, because it is one of the more legal, elements available. they actually found that there are children of alcoholics will have a different way of metabolism in the body than people who do not have. And this is not using alcohol, but their production of acetaldehyde is different from the children of non-alcoholic parents. Okay. What else will make you addicted? If I start to use a pain medication, or if I start to use something like heroin, the painful withdrawal will stop me from quitting, because withdrawal is so painful. If you're using heroin, the first 2 or 3 days are miserable, but then the cramps and stuff stay for pretty much longer, a little longer than that. Sometimes it's as much as 5 or 6 weeks people are uncomfortable. That's a long time for people who are really in the throes of whatever it is, not feeling good about themselves, probably having all kinds of problems, because people don't stop easily. Okay? If you're using cocaine, again, that's something that you're not going to kind of quit so easily, because cocaine, that first high that people get, that's the high they chase. It feels so good. No other cocaine hit after that feels as good. That's the high they're chasing. Okay? And then they'll do the cocaine to go up, and then they'll do something to come down, and then they'll do something else to go up, and then they'll do something else to come down, and they'll kind of balance it that way. People who have co-occurring disorders, okay, where they've got the anxiety and they've got a substance use problem, people pick and choose what drug they're going to use, because a lot of psychotropic medications don't work very well. Substances work much better. Okay, so substances is the first choice for a lot of may not be the first choice, but it works better, and so therefore people tend to go that way. And when you have a co-occurring disorder, when you have chronic pain, okay, for a while substance use is a relief. Okay, it takes away the pain, it chills you out, it makes you feel good. For a brief amount of time, it makes you feel good. The cost of what it does, as you go further and further down into dependence, then it doesn't feel good. But by then, it's hard to stop. Okay? What else makes people addicted? Environmental stuff. War zones. Okay? Drug-laden areas. That's all you see around you. You see the quick money. Okay, why would you not use it? That's the way you make money. There doesn't seem to be too many other ways to make money. Okay, if you're isolated and alienated from society, you would tend to use also. Think about your immigrant populations. Okay, a lot of them are isolated. A lot of them don't quite fit into the structure of society. A lot of them, their dreams are not what they want them to be. And so, you know, it's easy to drown it away. They've come with families left behind sometimes. Substances provide relief. For a while. And some communities, substance use has never been there, and then you introduce it and people use it, and there's no social norms guiding the use. And so they will use till they get, you know, intoxicated or high, because they don't have the social stoppers in place, if you will. It just makes it difficult. What happens in a family? First of all, we got to know that drug abuse over here, because there is choice, okay? Drug abuse is a preventable behavior. In this area, it can be prevented, it can be dealt with in a matter of speaking. Once you come here, drug dependence, that's a disease, but it's a treatable disease. You can get treatment for it, you can get better with drug dependence. People go into recovery and they stay in recovery. And you can have that happen. We'll talk about outcomes when we come along again. But when you have substance use in a family, the entire family is affected. Every single last one that's living in the immediate family, and a lot of time relatives outside also, okay, get pulled in. They talk about enablers for a family and for people who are using. An adult will generally have 10 to 12 enablers. Could be people in the immediate family, people who are and it could be people like employers, it could be friends, it could be a whole bunch of people. For children, Children have 50 to 60 enablers. It's just that much worse. But what happens in a family when someone is using substances where all the family members get affected in different ways, okay? There are certain rules that come into play. People tend to walk on eggshells. They will not say what they want to say for fear of upsetting the person who's using drugs, okay? I remember I had a young man in treatment whose father used to abuse crack. And when he would abuse crack, he would get paranoid and he would sit. And this little boy was his father's favorite child. And so the father would want his son with him at all times. And the son, you know, would stay with the father. And the father would use the crack, and then the father would get paranoid, and he would pop out and he would say, "Look at those cars and those cops coming to get us." And the kid would say, "Yeah, I see them." Okay? Because he knew that's what he had to tell his father. He wasn't going to tell his father, "No, I don't see them." Because you're linked to the father. Okay? There are a lot of feelings in the family, but no one really expresses those feelings. People take on different roles. Okay? You have the person who's using the drugs. That person, your user, basically is using for a variety of reasons. Most of the times it's so that they feel some relief from pain. Okay? They don't really carry anything. They are addicted. That's the price they're paying. That's what they're doing. And they generally don't feel good about themselves. I've had clients, when I work with them, try as they will, there's an emptiness in their eyes. And whatever you say, they're just so lonely. And there's not much you can say to make it work for them. You try and you try and you try, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Then you have the enabler. Generally, this is a spouse. It can be a child. It can be anyone who's enabling that person to continue using. Some of the common ways, if someone is using and is in no condition to go to work the next day, you call up the job and you say, "I'm sorry, must have eaten something terrible, got the stomach flu, not coming into work today." An enabler will do that. Someone who's not an enabler will say, "Well, you did that, you go out and make the phone call." But a lot of times the enabler may be dependent on the person who's using the substances. You also then have a hero in a family oftentimes, and people take on roles. The roles they take on, the roles can come, the roles can shift, all kinds of things can happen. Okay? I wasn't going to do more than one drawing, but I'm going to do another drawing. Okay? And what I'm going to do in this drawing is I'm going to show you very quickly over here. If you have the person who's addicted over here, and we make him a man, okay, then what you have over here is a wife, who would be your enabler. It's just because this makes it easier. What I'm doing is I'm drawing a genogram, a family diagram, to show what this comes across like. You have your enabler over here. And when you have your enabler, this person probably has had someone who's addicted in her family, because when she met this person, his behavior was familiar. Okay? That's the cycle that we are trying to break. That is the cycle we have to break. It's the patterns of behavior. They have a child, and things are not particularly happy, but they have this child, and what this child's role in the family is to make the family look good. Okay? If I do everything right, if I am perfect, okay, then my family, my parents will look good. So the mother will say, "Well, at least he is okay." Okay? This is the hero. This is your person who gets the straight A's, is the captain of the swim team, runs cross country and is the state champion for something else. And so when the family comes out and looks out over there, this is the kid they point to. Okay? That's the hero. We can't be a bad family if we got a kid like this in our family. Then you go on and you get the next person who comes in, and this person says, "What kind of a lie are they living?" Okay? And this one says, "I'm going to show what the family is really like." So that's the kid who goes and gets into trouble. Okay, that's the kid who goes and punches someone in the face and gets suspended from school. Okay, so this kid now becomes, well, of course, he would drink. He's got this child here. This kid becomes the scapegoat. So they will look and see what's going on in this family. And so that's another role that another person takes on. And then there's a kid where they say, well, thank God my daughter's easy. Okay? No problem. She's a good child. She does what she has to do. You never even know she's there. Okay? That kid's keeping quiet and saying, well, all this drama happens. If I can just survive, I'll run away as quickly as I can. I'll get away as quickly as I can. That's your lost child. A lot of times, lost children will leave home really early. Okay, they will walk away as quickly as they can. They'll go away to college. If that's not a college family, they'll go away to college. They'll go join the military. If it's sometimes the girls will run away. Sometimes the girls will get married at 17 or 18, have their own children. But they'll find some way to get out of the family.